I have a sister.
One sister, okay.
Yeah, and she's 8 years younger than me, and I had a wonderful life for 8 years. And then I had to share a bedroom. So,
Bummer.
but it is what it is. But no, my my folks were wonderful people and did good things for my sister and I. I don't know that we repaid them very well, but
And what did your dad? and
my
mom do?
dad was a fireman, and my mother, until about midway through high school, was a stay-at-home mom, and then she decided to go to work, and so I became a babysitter,
Mhm.
which it was okay. My sister's still alive.
Well, good, that's good.
She's still alive. And grew up in Oak Park, Illinois, if anybody is familiar with the Chicago area. Frank Lloyd Wright built some wonderful homes in that town, and I was privileged to walk past. Is it on?
I don't know. Says there's a green light, but
There is a green light.
It's on.
Okay, talk to it.
doesn't sound like it.
It doesn't sound like it.
Doesn't
But-
sound like it's on to me either.
Now it does.
Does it? Okay,
Okay,
There you
yeah,
go.
that does.
I mean, what a wonderful voice. Who would want to miss it?
Right on.
So I walked by those beautiful homes every day on my way to and from school, and appreciated the education I got there, and went to Lawrence College in Wisconsin, my first college year, and decided it wasn't for me. So I went home, saved my money, worked a year, and ended up down at the University of Missouri.
And what did you do while you were working that year?
I worked for a doctor and got to appreciate what those people do. And I still have an aversion when I look at mellow yellow, because one of my jobs was to test. And to this day, I really I have a problem.
Okay, so now you've gone to the University of Missouri.
Okay, I went to Lawrence
First, yeah,
College,
Yeah,
and then I stayed home. Then I ended up at the University of Missouri because a friend from Lawrence went down there, went to visit her, and hooked up with a guy from my cousin's wedding who was an ag student down there and a Marine. And I went to his graduation and his military ball. At his graduation, little did I know, my future husband was sitting 4 seats from him. So I saw Frank graduate before I even knew Frank.
goodness.
Then when I got down there, I got a roommate who was RLDS, Judy Adams Kramer. She would be the mother of Jen Hampton.
Ah,
So I was starting to get sucked into that, you're related to everybody thing. Had never heard of Graceland, had never heard of RLDS. I thought, they were Elvis people. And, if you don't know, you don't know. And so she educated me, and she took it upon herself to get me hooked up with someone. To this day, I remind her of that and blame her, but she has survived. I went to Lihona meeting, and the guy that was in charge was kind of cute. And I thought, said, you know him? Oh, I know all these guys. We went to Graceland together. I thought, okay. And so I was introduced, and he was not impressed. I did not meet any of his future wife requirements. I was not tall and never have been. I did not have brown hair, even though my, my stylist helps, but it never was brown. It was always blonde. And had to be a farm girl. I was, as far as you can be from that. And over the years, I had many jokes played on me because of my lack of rural experience. And you guys knew Frank, so you knew he took advantage of that. And then I had to be back 3 generations in the church.
Oh, my.
So I didn't hit any of the requirements. And as he was proud to say after things progressed, that I chased him until he caught me. So we met in October, we married in August, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Hey, when you know, you know.
And so then you moved
We came here.
to Lamoni.
Jerry Runkle is related, as are everybody else,
I didn't know you later.
it was always a revelation to me as to who was connected to who. And he invited Frank up to take a look at Graceland. Frank was finishing up his doctorate and wanted to go to Chicago and work for the Federal Reserve. And he says, well, let's go look. I like small town. I hated the city. And so I liked Lamoni. He was a little hesitant, but when you're newly married, you can.
But he grew up here, yes?
No, he grew
Oh.
up in Northwest Missouri,
Oh,
near Marvel,
okay.
otherwise known as Maryville. He came from Guilford, Missouri, and was a farm boy, and it clashed all the time, but we made it. We survived.
So he went to the University of Missouri because he was a Missourian.
That's right, because at that time, Graceland was just 2 years.
Right. So he came here for 2 years.
He came here for 2 years, went down there, finished his ag degree, and wanted to be a vet, but he had no money. So he said, I just wandered the halls of the ag building down at MU and looked at all the bulletin boards, and there were NDEA scholarships and you could pick your category. And he said, I decided I was going to be an ag economist. So
Oh, my goodness.
he skipped his master's, got his doctorate, and we didn't even go to graduation for his PhD. We had a U-Haul and a horse trailer and moved to Lamoni and have been here since 1965.
1965.
So
So you came to Lamoni, you were looking around, you said Frank was a little iffy about it.
well, he didn't have a choice. I mean,
Wanted a job.
here's this, oh no, this is where I wanted to
That's where
be.
you wanted to be.
And, there was a job, so what more can you ask?
Okay, so you moved out on a farm, you started out.
Oh, yes, we
Started on
were
the
out
farm.
3 miles west of town. One faculty member once asked him if we had running water and electricity. No joke, no joke, he did. And Frank took advantage of it. I have no idea what he told him, but the guy always looked at me kind of funny when I saw him. But we moved into town when Frank's MS showed up,
Okay.
because they told him, no driving around on a tractor and no more riding a horse, they may as well have shot him. But we managed, we moved into town.
And how long had you been married when the MS showed up?
Amy was a year and a half old. So that would have been 75. We moved here in 65.
10 years later.
He was diagnosed 10 years later. He went into remission and had another good 10 years. And then it hit again.
You don't open my
Oh, so eat it.
I know.
Who else has been breathing on this?
Yeah. Okay, so would you talk a little bit about what you did? I know didn't you work as a home economist? or what?
I had a Bachelor of Science in education. I was a home ec teacher, and that dates you. It's consumer science. But I taught for 1 year before we moved up here, and then I taught part-time out of Graceland for a year
Look at
because
you.
they were closing down
Yes.
the home ec program, much to my dismay, but it was what it was. And after that, I just stayed home and had kids and dressed him and made sure he walked out of the door looking halfway decent and his boots were clean.
Will you share some of your joys, some of your trials, some of the disappointments you've had in life and how you've managed all that?
Well, being married to Frank, there was never a dull moment.
Sure.
And he always made me laugh, so I guess that was, that helped. But I don't know that I had many disappointments. I'm sorry I didn't get to teach any more than I did because I enjoyed it, but there were other things that needed to be done, so I got them done and we moved on. But disappointments? Oh, I could have done without MS, but it was there and you had to deal with it, and it helped that Frank dealt with it well, because his attitude greatly influenced mine and the kids. Because I know one of them I guess there was a time when you're a junior or senior year, they do a personality survey and, go through all that and then meet with the guidance counselor, who happened to be Roy Shields.
Okay.
And one of the advantages I found of living in Lamoni is everybody, so you know where to go, for things. That is so nice and so convenient. But sidelight, those people get older
Yes.
and they retire and they don't do those things anymore. So when you have a need, you think, oh, I can get a hold of so-and-so. Well, no, you can't, because they moved away to be closer to their grandkids, or they wanted a warmer climate, or they did the unthinkable and that they died, so it messes up your whole game plan. But I love Lamoni because of that. I think it's great. And you couldn't get me back to the city if you dragged me, because I think I'd be kicking and screaming.
What was it like being a president's wife?
Not much different than not being, because as a president, he was not that. He wasn't that I'm the president all the time kind of person.
Mhm.
When he wasn't out there, he was out there on a horse and looking at his cattle and checking his crops. So president's wife was not what it's usually portrayed as being, it was just another job. And, you had to be nice and dress up every now and then, and which I enjoyed doing. But, it wasn't my whole life. It was part of it, and I enjoyed it.
Did you learn to ride a horse? Did you get out?
Oh,
No, no.
well, I rode a horse before we were married briefly to make an impression. And once, once we confirmed things, I rarely ever got on a horse. And pregnancy was always a good excuse.
Yes.
And no, the only thing for me that I ended up doing was opening cakes. When you go out in a truck and you check on things, somebody has to get out and open up the gates
Yeah.
so you can go through.
And shut them again.
Well, he was just a little unsteady on his feet, and so he really couldn't get out. So guess who did? I learned, how to get through the muddy part of a gate opening. And I learned how to make sure you latch it so it doesn't come open when you're not there and things get where they're not supposed to be. So, you learn.
You were sharing the other night, we happened to be together, and you were sharing about your children and that you originally thought you would have 4.
Oh, yes. Well, we,
Tell us about your children.
well, the oldest one now, Scott, lives in Port Angeles, Washington. And he and his wife just moved out there this summer. And he's a harbor master out there. And he has lived in Alaska and he's lived in Australia and he's our nomad, but I think he's gonna stay put this time. The second one is
So wait, hang
Cheryl.
on, and he has.
He has, 3 girls,
Yes.
a year apart. That's fun. But one is out at Graceland. Jillian is a junior.
Living with you.
No,
No,
well, during the summer,
during the summer lives with you.
but she is an EMT out of the Osceola
Oh.
Hospital in her spare time. Cheryl is down in Kansas City. She went to KU. Well, all 3 of the kids went to Graceland. She is a speech pathologist and worked in the Kansas City School District till a few years ago. She and her husband, Joe Silver, who is youngest son of Horsey, both taught. He was a K-5 art teacher, and they just retired.
Wow. Wonderful.
3 years ago. I'm not old enough to have
No,
kids
no.
that are retired. What is going on? It's just,
They're just really young, right?
oh, yes, yes.
That's it.
And the third one,
And they got into horticulture, they got into,
oh, they
landscaping.
landscaped the church.
I was gonna say, they did a lot of landscaping.
Yes, that was weekends and
That was
summers.
just a hobby.
Yes, that made money.
Yeah, wonderful.
That's what happens when you have a dad who's an economist. It all comes down to money.
Well.
And so, oh, you have a free summer, get a job. But then there's the youngest one. And she needs no introduction. Amy is in Kansas City. She has been a marketing person for a company out of Australia that makes wedding gowns. And she worked in Australia for a while, then the company moved here, so she is here now and loves her job, gets to do all the photo shoots and the propaganda layouts and the presentations and all that kind of stuff. And she has 2 dogs.
And you said there's a high-end wedding gowns, right?
Oh, well, some of them are, some of them are
Have the
not,
whole
but
gamut.
Essence of Australia, in case you're wedding gown shopping someday. And but she's also in Kansas
So
City.
you have the 3 grandchildren.
Yes, Scott had the grandchildren. The girls did not. They have pets. And every once in a while I have to pet sit, but no, Frank claimed it's my fault the girls did not have any kids. Because he blamed me for making feminists out of them,
Oh,
which
well,
I
right
did not. I did not. I just told it like it was. Said, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but if you do it, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. It's your decision. It will be your responsibility. So choose wisely, and they have pets. But I do have 3 granddaughters, and they are just as different as night and day, and that's good. One's in St. Louis, one's here, one's in Australia.
Oh my goodness, it's Australia, you got an Australia connection.
Oh, yes,
I
yes.
can see that.
Yeah, she's gonna be a marine biologist, so
Wow.
we'll see.
Is that from the Alaska experience, do you think?
I doubt it.
Just something she decided.
No, when she decided what she wanted to do, she got to looking about where to do it. East Coast, West Coast, obviously,
Yeah, not
Lamoni
Lamoni.
and Kansas City are not, you don't dive much. And so she didn't like either coast because it really wasn't the area she wanted, so she ended up in Australia.
Tell me about your Christmas shopping excursions. I love them. It's one of my favorite things.
Well, anybody, you can see how all of this happened because you knew Frank. Grift shopping was not, thank heavens for Patty McDowell. He would call her and say, Patty, I need a card or I need a gift. And when he was not completely mobile, he'd drive there, park in front of Country Plus, and she'd bring all this stuff out for him to look at, which he then would buy. But I mean, that's okay. But I've caught on, so ahead of time, I would tell her what I wanted
Oh, good.
to make sure she brought that out for him to look at and eventually buy. So, that worked out well, but when the older kids were out of Graceland and Amy would have been just junior high, Christmas Eve at approximately 9:30, we would load in the car and go down to Walmart in Bethany. And the kids could go in, shop for their Christmas presents. But yeah, they only had a half an hour because then the store would close. So they would go and do their shopping, and we did this several years in a row, so that the people down at Walmart would wait until we got there before they started closing things up, because they knew, we were coming to shop. And we never had, pretty packages under the tree. We had Walmart bags. But hey, it worked, they got their disposable razors and shaving cream and, everything they needed. And we didn't know. And so that was our Christmas shopping for the family.
Was that because it was less expensive on Christmas Eve?
No,
Okay,
no,
I thought maybe the
just,
economist was coming through.
well, yes, it snuck in every so. But no, it was not cheap because,
You
there's,
love fill their shopping carts.
there's
I mean,
more, you bet
yeah.
there's more than deodorant and,
Yeah, they
and
filled their shopping carts. Each of them had a shopping
Yeah.
cart they filled.
Okay.
and
I remember the kids loved it. I remember
Oh,
them,
yeah.
them talking about it. They loved it.
well, Scott does it with his girls,
Does he?
even to this day. And I mean, they're all college age, but they do Walmart on Christmas Eve.
Tradition.
Oh, yeah, gotta have tradition.
Talk a little bit about, okay, so you weren't a member of the RLDS church, hadn't
No.
heard of it. I don't know what background you came from, but
Well, I was ecumenical.
okay, and what is your relationship? How did that all transpire through the years?
I was somewhat of a rebel. You can't, don't say that. Don't laugh. Don't use that.
Still.
And the fact that I hooked up with Frank, made it even more so, because I mean, there was contention between the two of us as well as other people and things. But my mother never drove a car until later in life. And so my dad, who was a fireman, worked 24 hours on and off. So pretty much every other Sunday, he was not available. So my sister and I walked to whatever church was in our neighborhood.
Okay.
And he rarely went, and my mother did not go that much. So we were kind of doing our own thing. And so I was baptized Lutheran. I went to the local Baptist church, the local Evangelical United Brethren, the pastor of which was the father of my best friend. Went to a few other churches because my folks were house flippers before that was a thing. And so in the same town. And so whatever was close is where I went and kind of did my own thing, played piano for Sunday school and helped with crafts and all that kind of stuff. Finally, in high school, my mother decided we all needed to join the same church. So we all became Congregationalists, whatever that means. And so that was, I tried them all and had never heard of RLDS. I thought, oh, maybe, like ALS or something. It's it's something you can be cured of, or so.
I don't think so.
I didn't know. But so and I think Frank felt, a little obligated to impart knowledge to me.
And you said he came from a family with 3 generations.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you
Oh,
said
yeah.
he wanted somebody. with
He came from Pisgah.
with
and
Pisgah, Iowa.
I mean, if you're not from Pisgah, you're almost not RLDS. I learned, but we talked and we met in October. I was baptized spring break. We got engaged and we married in August. So, hey, when you know what you want, you go for it and get it done. And since I met all the requirements that he had for a future wife, it just came together.
That's pretty good. Okay, so have you had spiritual experiences that have changed the way you thought about God through the years?
Well, thank heavens, it expanded, because I can remember as a little kid. And I think this was the Baptist influence that, you reap what you sow. So if I had it in my head, if I did something I shouldn't have, the fact that I flunked a test or, bruised my heel or somebody me. And it was not a healthy kind of thing. So thank heavens over the years and with the help of people in the church, my idea and my view of God expanded wonderfully. And so it took time, but I've always been grateful for that. And it made me a different person. I shouldn't say different. I should say more of a person, because there were aspects of me that I didn't even know were there.
For example,
70 years ago, I would not be sitting here with a microphone talking. I'd be sitting in the corner trying to be as quiet as I could so nobody would notice me. And then maybe that was the way it should have been. But the association with the church and with Frank and what the church made him is responsible for what I am now. And it was a wonderful experience. Nothing mountaintop, no voices, just growth.
so how do you view God now?
I'm still on the journey, and I think probably the best part is that it's made me realize that in and of myself, I can do something. And the doing is the reward and the expansion. And no mountaintop experiences, just
Just a day to day, just a day.
Yep.
Good life.
regardless of what the day held.
Mhm.
I mean, because it wasn't all fun.
No, you worked hard.
And we made it as well as we could with what we had to work with them. And made it for 52 years.
52. So what are your hobbies? What do you like to, how do you like to spend your time?
I like to nap. I think every day should have at least the option. You know, you may not take it, but it's there. I just enjoy pretty much everything I do. I love to cook. I love to eat, as you can tell. I've done home eccy things, and I had for a few years a quilt shop in Lamoni. I
Really?
did, yeah, I didn't make, I just,
Remember that?
I had,
You remember Carol's quilt shop?
Yeah, it was across the street from the old clinic.
Yeah.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I do not remember.
it's
that.
now an empty lot
Oh my goodness.
behind Becky Silver's house,
Mhm.
Nate's house. But no, I had Amish, I had Mennonite, I had little old ladies in Texas that I bought quilts from and sold them out of my shop.
Oh, I kind of remember. That's kind of coming
Yeah.
back. Yeah,
And it was aptly named Quilt City.
yes.
So
There you go.
it was fun. I met a wonderful woman by the name of Adelina Clark, who knew a lot more about quilting than I ever did. And she ran the store for me. And
And they moved, she was an ILDS, was she? No?
yes, she was.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
they went down
yeah. Forgot about it.
south in Missouri to, I never can remember the name. It was kind of a group thing that she was a part of,
Okay, okay. I've
but,
forgotten about her.
yep,
So do you still quilt?
pardon?
She does well.
No, never did.
She's a buyer and seller.
Yep, I just bought and sold,
Okay.
and, as most people are, I was very hesitant to get into quilting because, I mean, you get judged, you know?
Oh,
And even though I was a home ec teacher, I thought, are my stitches gonna be little enough? And
yeah, oh,
are they
gosh.
gonna be even enough? And so I never really got into that part of it. I admire it. I think it's great. And I think the people that do it get cheated because they do
Oh,
not get
time.
paid
Mm.
for the time and the effort that they put into it. But I love the results.
Mhm.
I am in awe of those people.
Mhm.
So did you have a relationship with the Mike Society during that time?
No,
Okay.
not really.
Whether, I didn't know if you would get quilts from them.
No,
Too expensive.
no, they did their own.
Yeah, Mike's really do it for other people, right? For the most part, they do, that's what some people have done. Yeah. What other questions do people have?
I think,
What?
if I recall, your year of teaching was the same location of Barbara's first year of teaching in the lower 48.
Oh, yes, yes, I taught
Really?
at a little, I can't remember the name of it now, but it was, huh? Oh, that's where I student taught. Yes, I did my student teaching in Vandalia, Missouri, and well, like everything else, it's an experience, you know? In fact, kind of, well, I'm bragging just a little, but I did my student teaching, and this was in the spring, and I got a job offer from that school district after I did my student teaching, because they canned the gal that I taught under.
Oh, my
So
goodness. Well, Nathan.
I don't know what that indicates, but I always felt a little guilty about that, but I thought, hey, they asked you, but we obviously were not gonna be there, so. But and then I taught a year out of Graceland because they were closing out.
Is that
the
Mrs.
whole-
Mrs. Kessner? Is that who
Uh,
replaced Mrs. Roberts? That's who was.
I had the fabric horses.
That's
And
Mrs. Roberts.
I think that's who it was.
I think it's Mrs. Roberts, yeah.
One was tall.
Yeah, Mrs.
one
Kessler was a short one. Yeah,
So,
I took those classes. I know. Woo.
well, and it makes you feel kind of old. I think back and I think Peggy Henson was one of my students.
Yes, she would have, she and I were the
And,
classmates.
and there were some other people in Lamoni that I had as students. And I was what? 3 years older than you?
Mhm.
So it was
Mhm.
kind of, whoa, this is really something, I was so impressed with myself, but it faded.
Now, Frank was a single, I mean, he was the only child, is that
Yes.
true?
Yeah, he came into his family after 17 years of marriage
Oh.
because his father didn't want the neighbors to talk.
Didn't want the neighbors to talk.
No, they were married for 17 years and were, they just assumed they had health issues and things, so they had been told they probably wouldn't have any kids. And well, for 4 months, he was a cancer because his mother was 39, and she was just convinced that she had cancer, so she did not go to the doctor.
Oh, my goodness, that's.
And so finally, in December, her mother convinced her that regardless of what you find out, you have got to go to the doctor. So she went and she was x-rayed, which is
Oh, my
a no-no.
goodness.
And he was born premature the middle of January.
Oh, my goodness.
So he,
Had quite a life, didn't he?
oh, yes, yes. And his mom was 39, his dad was 42. So Frank said, he says, I was never a kid. He said, my dad always treated me like an adult. But he did act like a kid. And he had a different relationship with Jesus than most people do. He would climb up on the dining room table and eat sugar out of the sugar bowl on the table. And every once in a while he would get caught. And Effie, his mother, Franklin, it was never Frank, it was Franklin. We really, you shouldn't do that. It's not good for you. You shouldn't. So, the time would pass and she'd catch him again. And so she tried to guilt him. And she says, she said, Jesus wouldn't like that. He wouldn't think that was good that you're doing it. And so that worked for a while. But then one day, Franklin, Jesus would be very disappointed in you if he saw you doing that. Well, Mom, I just told Jesus to look the other way. So,
What are some other of your favorite Frank stories? Lots of them.
What area do you have in mind?
Well, I can think of several where he would entertain his audience with his toupee.
Well, yes, he wore a hairpiece. Medically, he was not fond of it, but he had 2 shunts in his head. And the doctor said, you know, it would be nice because he was, you know, the parking lot bald. By the time he was 25. And so they said it would be nice if you had something to protect your head. So he got a hairpiece, which he hated. And it became a teaching tool because if he would get agitated and want to make a point or something in class, quite often, certain members of the class would get a hairpiece thrown at them if they weren't paying attention, or, you know, it served a purpose. And he disliked it so much that when he would come home, most people take off their hat. He would take off his hair and just throw it, you know, it could land most anywhere. Well, he came home one time, we were living right across the way there, and we had a cat. And so later we were going somewhere, and so kids get to looking, Dad needs his hair. And so everybody would fan out in the house and we'd look for the hairpiece. Well, a few minutes later, Cheryl, Dad, I found your hairpiece. Oh, okay. Well, where was it? The cat had gotten it and buried it in her cat box.
Oh, no.
And so he went and got the hairpiece out of the cat box, shook it off, popped it on his head, and we went wherever we were going. But I mean, and he wouldn't wear it at home. So if students would come over to see him, he said, it's just so much fun. He said, to open the door and have a student look at you without your hair. And he, of course, he never said anything to them or anything. He said, I just like to see how they reacted. And he said, it was entertaining because some of them, they didn't know whether to be embarrassed or to not notice or to say something or whatever. It's just, and he went to a board meeting once out of Graceland for some money, and Bill Higdon had been there just before him with a group of American Indians. I'm not sure just what the connection was, but they had been there to ask the Shaw Foundation for money. Well, Frank was the next one up. So he said, I had to do something to get their attention. And I thought, oh, you know, I hated to ask. But he said, no, he said, I just decided that, you know, I told him, you cannot give these people any money. They're Indians. And he said, they'll scalp you. And he took his hairpiece off and threw it on the table and then proceeded to give his dog and pony show for what he was there for. And it just, you know, it just.
So I'm just curious, how much of Frank's personality rubbed off on you?
It didn't rub off, it rubbed me. So that I became proactive
Okay.
in that most of the times I did not laugh purposely because you don't want to encourage.
Oh, I
someone.
always wanted to encourage you.
But it just made it worse.
I know.
Yes,
I
it just
love
made
it.
it worse. If he knew it irritated you, he did it more. So, you kind of had to protect yourself. It was like that when we were first married in our early married life. It was like that after his MS put him in an electric wheelchair because he'd come after you with it. And so you learned to stand, if you were opening a door, you learned to stand behind the door so that he wouldn't hit you in the shins when he went through, which sometimes he did on purpose. I mean, it wasn't accidental. It was, oh, okay. So,
Well, he was a very
Survival.
unpretentious president that we probably ever had at Graceland.
yeah. Well, I think he was the only one that went to commencement in cowboy boots.
Yeah, I'm sure that's probably true.
And, but they were clean. I cleaned them. And, he wore a cowboy, a Stetson hat. And, he would get comments about it. Of course, you know him, so you know how he'd react. He said, these people just do not realize. He said, these boots and this hat cost more than most of them spend on a car because they were very good boots and they were Stetson hats. And he said, and that's me. So he had his doctoral robe that he hung on a coat rack in the president's office.
Mhm.
And it was right next to a window. Over time, the sun shining in the window faded one of the sleeves of his doctoral robe. So he brings it home and he says, Carol, look what happened to my robe. He said, can you fix it? I don't know. I obviously couldn't dye it because of the fabric and the velvet and all that stuff. So I got a can of spray paint and I spray painted the arm of his doctoral robe. It was black. It was a little stiff, but it was black and that was fine with him. So, and I mean, that's kind of indicative of what our life was like. Little unconventional, but always fun.
Always fun.
Always. Fun.
Yes, I can remember the Christmas Eve service right here. You might recall that. One of my favorite memories.
The whistling or the
Yes,
tiny
the
buttons?
Well, either one, but
Somebody
the
else.
whistling is what I'm thinking of.
Well,
We
we-
weren't here.
Huh?
We weren't here.
Yeah, you have to
Oh,
share.
somebody else
Well,
did.
we had a very wonderful
Christmas Eve.
elder. Who was it, Clarence Ball?
Yeah, Clarence.
Yeah,
Clarence
yeah,
Ball.
Clarence.
It was Christmas Eve service and we were all sitting here, and families and stuff, and singing hymns. Well, Clarence, for whatever reason, decided that we should whistle. Frank could not whistle.
Silent night.
Frank could not whistle. And what he did, I mean, it sounded awful. It was kind of like the cicadas coming out or something. It was just nasty. And of course, and he thought whistling Silent Night was funny. And
It was.
so it was even worse. And everybody around where we were sitting were trying to whistle. But he was laughing, and when he would start laughing, you couldn't help but laugh. And so Silent Night always brings back different memories for the group that sat around there. And but it was what it was. When we went to Evergreen to church, they did their own grape juice for communion. And so I don't know if they were pints or quarts or whatever, but anyway, one Sunday, Communion Sunday, our older kids were old enough to take communion, but Amy wasn't. So, but they always sat in the front. And we had the communion passing and so forth. And of course, the people up in front got it first, and Frank happened to be up front that day. Well, he, took his wine and we get this look, And so the kids are down there. Look at this. And so it was good stuff. It really wasn't what you expected, and it wasn't what he expected. And but we rolled with it. None of us died.
I don't think I know the Tiny Button story.
Can't remember that
I don't think I've heard that one.
one. When we were out at Evergreen, Frank played the
Yeah,
piano
how many years were you in, did you attend Evergreen?
till it burned down,
Until it burned, yeah, okay.
which is another story. He played the piano as well as the saxophone. He played the saxophone in a dance band that played around the area while he was here at school. And, but anyway, played the piano. Poorly, but he played the piano. He took lessons as a kid from Mrs. McClanahan in Guilford, Missouri, at 10 cents a lesson. If he practiced and his lesson was good, he got a nickel back. But he did not make his fortune
Doing that.
because he very seldom got the nickel back. But he played, nonetheless, he played the piano. And every hymn that he played, because that's all he played, he took lessons because, he might need to know how to play the piano. Everything was a march. And so regardless of, the old path or, what a friend we have in Jesus, it was a march and it was loud. And we used to put flowers on top of the piano. And sometimes he played vigorously enough that the flowers would come down. But he never missed
Missed
a
a
note.
note.
It might not have been the right note, but he continued on through thick and thin and played the piano for us.
And you said you played the piano too. You had lessons
Yes.
and you still play?
No. No, I quit halfway through high school. And even though we do have a piano,
It doesn't get played.
no, that was for the kids. They took, well, the girls took lessons from Jerry Gale Ramsey.
Oh, yes.
And but, the Evergreen Church,
Yes.
it was a wonderful place. To our kids, church is Evergreen. It's not this or any other place. It's Evergreen because they had 5 million grandparents, because it was an older congregation. And there were very few kids. After all the Stevensons went through, there were very few kids there. And am I still?
Yeah.
Okay. It was the first service of the new year. And Frank was speaking. His topic was new beginnings. And 3 days later, the church burned.
Oh, wow.
And Jackie Lane, who was our resident pianist, reminded us, she said, "Do you guys realize the hymns that we sang that Sunday?" Well, one of them was "The Spirit of God like a fire." And the church burned down 3 days later. Remember that? Okay, but no, it was an old building. It had one of those 4 furnaces and something went wrong. But no, it was his new beginnings and the Spirit of God like a fire. And
So then you started coming.
then we started coming in here. And
And do you know what year that was? How long ago that was? I don't know how long. Anybody know?
I think the
Where
kids
would you think?
were out of Graceland.
In the 90s?
probably, in the 90s, yeah.
What words of wisdom would you like to share with the group as?
You really.
Yes, yes, you've lived a wonderful life.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's wise, but having been a very not sheltered, but inexperienced and told that as a children should be seen and not heard growing up. My experience has been very broadening
Mhm.
for me as a person. And
Even in a small town like Lamoni.
even in a small town like Lamoni, I thought it was great and still do. And through our whole time here, this community has been a support for us. And we had stuff that we needed to be supported in.
Yes.
And the kids always say, well, Mom, when are you gonna move down to Kansas City? Said, if I can take care of myself and I'm not a menace on the interstate, I'm staying right here because this is where I am at. And this is where I became me. And I wouldn't be any other place. Now, if I'm not here, then you need to worry because because I didn't go willingly. So, but no, it's just been it's been my life expanding experience to live in this town. And it has made me what I am. Sorry, folks, but you know, it is what it is. And it's great. I'm thankful for it every day.
Well, we're thankful you're here.
Oh, good. That's always good to hear.
Anything anybody wants to chime in with? Anne, okay.
Back when Amy was probably 4 or 5 and they were coming to Bible school and we were upstairs. Yeah. And I was helping with that age group and Di Smith was too. And I don't know exactly what we were doing. The kids were all sitting around the table and they were chattering and doing their whatever, craft or something. But we suddenly heard Amy, and apparently she was talking about life at home. And the one thing we heard was, well, yeah, every now and then, though, we're getting ready to go, and we'll hear Mom say, Frank, have you got your hair on?
Hey, you do what you do to get your kids ready for whatever you're doing. And I always claim I had 4 kids.
Yes.
One was just a lot older than the
Yes.
other. And, you know, you dealt with it. That was about it. And who was the gal? Who's the postmaster?
Here in Lamoni? or
Yes.
outside?
Joe Outhouse?
No,
No, no.
Guy, Silsby.
Yeah,
Still be,
okay.
What brilliant point was I trying to make? Oh, the gal that was married to Jim Silsby. Anyway, she worked with the preschool and she worked with Sunday school. And so, I don't know, we were talking one day and she says, oh, she said, Amy's just so much fun to have in class. And, so I said, well, that's good, you know. But she said, you know, for the longest time, she said, we would talk to her about her family. And she said, well, there's Scott and there's Cheryl and Amy. And so, and this gal was funny. And I wish I could remember her name. Oh, but anyway, she said for the longest time, she said, I thought her name was Aunt Amy. Because she would talk about Scott and Cheryl.
And
And Amy. So she's- I mean, she didn't mean, but it was chuckles anyway. She's, I always thought her name was Aunt Amy. And Walter Snively out at Evergreen, who was our faithful deacon for 5,000 years.
At least.
And I mean, if it had to be open, Walter was there and it was ready to go. And our kids were little when my folks came to visit from Chicago, and we went to church and so Frank was introducing my folks around and introduced them to Walter, and Scott was there with him, and he said, this is Walter Snively. I know our deacon. My folks were not church members, knew very little about it. And, but he said, this is Walter Snively, our deacon, and Scott pulls on his sleeve and he says, Dad, that Walter Snively, that's Jesus. And Frank says, well, Scott, what? Well, you tell us every Sunday when you give us our offering and stuff, we need to give that to Jesus. And our kids didn't know any other, to them, they gave their money to Jesus, who was Walter Snively. And so, we had another evergreen experience. Marie knows all of this because she and Jim and their kids, about the same age as our kids, all went out there, and Bolingbrookes and Shields, yeah. And but no, to our kids, church is evergreen, Walter Snively is Jesus, and the potluck was born out there.
There you go.
Because they had, in our kids' estimation, the best potlucks in the world. And Evergreen was church, Jesus, and potlucks.
Right. Thank you, Carol. Really appreciate you sharing.
Carol, I want to say, I don't mean to interrupt,
No,
but
do.
as a baptized Lutheran in the Congregationals for 3 years, I'm thrilled with your story.
Oh,
And I can say this about every single person in this room and on Zoom. I want to thank you for your life of devotion to
Absolutely.
Graceland, to this community, and your ministry, your many, many decades of ministry to this congregation.
well,
And we don't say that
Yes.
enough to each other,
And
but
I-
everybody
yes.
here has that
Yes.
thought from me, and it's recognized by many, many people that you've never
you.
met.
thank you.
And it's so true. You've done so many things.
Well,
And kind of in the background, you kind of stay in the background, but you
and
have
that's
been
just fine
of
with me.
service for so many years.
Jay, you're in the background.
Much appreciated.
Fine with me.
Did I say that out loud?
Yes.